A very warm welcome to you all to this panel, Earth Logic, Grow Out of Growth. It's so good to have you all with us today. Thank you so much for sharing your time and energy with us. Thank you also to Copenhagen Fashion Summit for inviting us today. And thanks to our esteemed guests who are joining us and to those around the world who have been supporting us and acting on Earth Logic. I am Kate Fletcher, Professor at Centre for Sustainable Fashion, London College of Fashion in the UK.
And I'm Matilda Tam, Professor in Design at Linnaeus University, Sweden, and also affiliated with Goldsmiths, University of London.
Today, we are examining the logic, or perhaps you might say the illogic, of growth. In response to calls for more growth, the pioneering systems thinker and environmentalist Donella Meadows would say that we should always ask a whole series of questions, including growth of what and why and for whom and who pays the cost and how long can it last and what's the cost to the planet and how much is enough. 2 years ago, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change declared a decade of change, that we have less than a decade to avert the disastrous, irrevocable effects on the planet of a changing climate. This is therefore also a decade of a shift to less and a decade which we must dedicate to growing out of growth.
9 months ago at London Fashion Week, we launched Earth Logic Action Research Plan for Fashion. Since we have reached over 1 million people globally through media articles, social media, and a number of live and online workshops and talks. Fashion stakeholders from industry, from governance, education, research, media, and citizens tell us that they trust and believe in the Earth Logic plan because it cuts straight to the core of the problem, overproduction and overconsumption driven by the economic growth logic, and because it doesn't pretend we can fix climate change with tweaks. They believe in the Earth Logic plan because it doesn't pretend it's simple, but instead proposes that we have to stay with the trouble and work for social justice and a healthy planet at the same time. And they believe in the Earth Logic plan because it offers a concrete plan that all organizations and individuals can work with. And they also see that it can work for all sectors, actually beyond fashion. Today, we want to address the most provocative and powerful proposal of the Earth Logic plan, which is a shift to less, a shift to a smaller fashion sector. We have invited to this panel 3 leaders of change, an ecological economist, an entrepreneur, a journalist. Together with them, we will examine pressing questions of moving to less, economic implications, worker impacts, and shifting behaviors for citizens and for the media. As we said, it is not simple, and we also know we have to do it. Whilst we're talking, we'd really like to also hear from you, so keep posting your questions.
So, what is Earth Logic? So, you can download the full report at earthlogic.info, but a short introduction to it first. So Earth Logic is a radical invitation to business, governance, the media, to education, to put Earth first, before profit, before everything. This is both simple, because if we have to do it if we're going to avert catastrophic climate change within the time frame of less than a decade. Simple, yes, but it also changes everything. Because when we put earth before profit, we don't ask, what is the business case for sustainability? We don't ask how we can make money from sustainability, but instead we define the purpose of business differently. We ask, what is the sustainability case for business? In what ways can business, or any activity, make a real contribution to a healthy and just planet? What we're talking about here is a planet-first sense of purpose that specifies the appropriate ends for business and economic activity.
Does it have to be this drastic? Do we have to change this much? Yes. Earth logic is based on the global scientific consensus, drawing on evidence including from the Stockholm Resilience Center, which feeds into the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. The researchers that created the influential planetary boundaries model, along with many others, recognize that incremental change is insufficient and that we have to deal with the underlying forces if we wish to make the change that we need to make. We have to work deeper at the level of the system and the paradigm. Leading scientists call what needs to happen the great transition, as opposed to conventional development. To put this in context and to explain what change of this scale means, product level change is tweaks, such as replacing conventionally farmed cotton with organic cotton. This characterizes a first generation of approaches to sustainability. It's certainly important, but benefits are eaten up by ever increasing volumes. Systems change can mean new business models, shifting from products to services, changes in law and policy, as well as changes in relationships. This can be termed a second generation of approaches to sustainability. Again, an improvement, but as the sector expands, even benefits here are eaten up. The paradigm. This is where the purpose of the fashion sector is set. Currently, this is growth. Without change here, the sector will keep growing, and at best, it's getting worse more slowly. When Darwin proposed his theory of evolution, this was a new way of seeing a paradigm shift. We also propose a shift, Earth logic instead of growth logic. Earth logic places the health and survival of our planet Earth, including humans and other species, before business interests. Earth logic consists of 3 parts. The first is a values explicit context. This is important because science tells us that values actually are more effective at changing behavior than, say, money. An example of our values is care, which can radically transform our relationship with fashion. The second part is a checklist to keep work on Earth logic course, such as that we need to leave behind notions that technology will fix it and that somebody else will do it. The third part is the 6 landscapes to direct work.
Today we are zooming in on one of the landscapes, less, grow out of growth. As you've already heard, incremental change will not be sufficient. And some notoriously careful scientists from the University of Cambridge stipulate that all sectors will need to both reduce and shift their energy consumption to meet climate change targets. They suggest a complete phasing out of any electricity using activities that can't be electrified and therefore switched to renewable sources, and a minimum of 40% reduction in total activity. Less is the largest provocation associated with the transition to sustainability. And here lies the greatest temptation to veer into techno fixes. In conversations, we find understandable resistance to the challenge of less, and a lot of effort gets channeled into get out clauses, into coming up with ideas for exceptions and exemptions. To address some of the crucial questions that less raises, we have brought in an ecological economist, Professor Georgios Kallis. Welcome, Georgios. First of all, can we ask, why will sufficient change not happen within the dominant economic model?
The dominant economic model is based around the idea and the pursuit of GDP growth. If the economy doesn't grow 2 or 3% per year, it risks collapsing. It is what we face now. It's also what we faced in 2008. The moment the economy slows down, it's like a bicycle that unless you keep moving the wheels, the bicycle falls down. But 3% per year might sound very little, but for those a little bit familiar with the logic of exponential curves in mathematics, 3% per year means that the global economy of today, by the end of this century, will be 12 times bigger. 12 times bigger is an unthinkable amount. Right now, the economy is moving $80 trillion in goods and services. This means that we expect an economy and we structure the whole society, mobilize the whole society to produce an economy that by the end of this century will produce 12 times more, or if you want, 12 times faster what it produces now. Almost 1,000 trillions of dollars going around. But the economy is also material. It's 90 billion tons of materials that are extracted and used right now by the global economy. And we expect, and we structure our life around the expectation that by the end of the century, we're gonna move 12 times more materials around. This makes any transition that takes, does not question this goal of economic growth seriously impossible.
Thank you. So it's clear that the dominant economic model isn't working. It's insufficient if we're going to really meet these climate change targets. Yet the growth economy is so pervasive. It's like almost the water we swim in, making it hard to see it clearly. But there are other ways to organize the economy, aren't there? Can you talk a little about some of the ways that alternative economic models can avoid a reduction of quality of life and increase social justice?
In my recent book, The Case for Degrowth, I built a case for escaping this menace, I would call it, of economic growth by rooting our economies into a new economies of what we call the commons. So economies of collective production, of consumption, of sharing, of cooperative production, a different way of organizing and governing the economy. A core question there is the question of justice. And I think justice, first and foremost, is about sharing. It's about sharing and about redistributing. Right now, 2,000 billionaires own as much wealth and have as much income as 4 billion people in this planet, and it's just 2,000 people. We're talking about an extreme amount of inequality and injustice that we haven't seen the last century. And first and foremost, the question of economic transformation is a question of ending with this injustice and redistributing from those that have too much to those that have too little. It's also a matter of shifting production from producing excess and unnecessary, in many cases, goods and services, to producing the basics, to securing the basics. With the crisis we faced with COVID, this became more evident than ever, that there were too many things that could be easily cut, and we didn't have the capacity to shift resources to what was vital and necessary, which was the protection of public health and the securing that the basic needs of everyone will be met. So we produce too much, but at the same time, we haven't found the mechanisms to redistribute and move the excess of that, of the unnecessary we're producing, to securing that we produce enough and basic for everyone. An economy of the commons, we emphasize, is an economy of relations, an economy of relational goods. an economy where well-being is produced through our relations, which are infinite in a way, and they don't have the limit that the material economy has. Right now, our economy is driven by positional goods, goods that they cost a lot, that we want to acquire them in order to position ourselves in terms of status or in terms of class higher than others. These goods are infinite, unlimited, and ultimately destructive. So we need to transition to an economy of the commons that it's built on relations, not positions.
Thanks, Georgios. Thinking about relationships and justice, there's one question that's so frequently asked when we begin to talk about less, and this is about what does a shift towards less mean for employment, including those in the global south?
Yes, it's a strange feature of our current system that if we have to work less because we don't need to produce things that they are damaging for us or that we don't need, we have to work less, and that's considered as a problem rather than as an achievement. If someone told me, you don't have to produce this unnecessary thing you're producing and you can sit in your house and enjoy it with your friends and family, this is something good, no? But in the current society, having to work less is framed as a problem of unemployment. It doesn't have to be that way, and open-minded economists, not all economists, but open-minded economists since Keynes already in the 1930s have argued that if we become more productive and we can produce more with less, or if we want to produce and consume less and therefore work less, the easiest thing to do is to share the available amount of work. Everybody works less and everybody has work. There's going to be less work to go around and we can all work fewer hours, but everyone have work. Right now what we have is people who work too much and people who don't have work. A basic proposal of the new type of economics that I'm an advocate for is the idea of reducing working hours. Reducing working hours means sharing work, working less and sharing the work that there is. About the Global South, I think it's too big of a category to talk about the Global South as one thing. There are obviously countries and areas and people, I would say, we better have to think about people, low-income people, where they lack basic needs. And there is a need for more production and more consumption of these basic goods, and also more work to be done. But again, in the global north where we are based, I don't see any strong case for more work, more production, more consumption. We are produced too much and we can share what we are producing and work less.
Thanks, Georgios.
So, Georgios, you really showed us that there are different ways to look at employment. And as you all know, of particular importance as we make the transition to consider the implications globally. That is one of the key things when we face less. And frequently, protecting employment opportunities is used as a reason not to make the transition to less. It has even been said that it's socially irresponsible to make a shift to a smaller sector. And this is actually really cynical, since many workers are geographically located in places that feel the effects of environmental disaster first. Safia Amini is an award-winning social entrepreneur and founder of fashion company People Tree. She certainly has first-hand experience of bringing together environmental work and social justice work, and she can provide, therefore, some invaluable perspectives. So we met her and we asked her to spell out what will the reduction in the material scale of the economy actually mean for workers.
Hello, I'm Safia Amini. I'm founder of People Tree and Real Sustainability, author of Slow Fashion and also Slave to Fashion. I think the argument's often used that we can't contract the fashion industry without impacting very negatively the workers within it. But I'd argue that if we look at the FOB price and we see that only 3% on average is spent on labour, that there is a totally different way of doing fashion. And I think we've proven that in fair trade. So from using organic regenerative agriculture, we can grow organic cotton, we can pay the farmers decently whilst strengthening the fertility of the soils, creating a carbon sink, which is going to also create and mitigate the worst of climate change. At the same time, we can use craft skills like hand weaving, hand knitting and hand embellishment to promote livelihoods in rural areas, which after all is where garment factory workers would prefer to be living in many cases. So there is a different way of doing fashion. It's about producing less, but increasing the value addition in every product that we make and buy.
Safi has also told us that better models actually already exists and that they have been piloted in other sectors and that the problems and that they also have been troubleshooted, and that what we really need to do now is to implement them in fashion, and that we also need to bring investors in asking critical questions into the mix. But we feel that this leads to a critical and more structural question about how the global south can thrive if the global north shrinks its resource consumption, given the global nature of business.
The Global South will continue to be a very important supplier of regenerative organic agriculture and other sustainable fibres and fabrics. There'll also be this burgeoning and excitement around the traditional craft skills that we find in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, and those will support some of the heritage skills that we're refinding here in Europe. And I think there'll be a transition also to more selling from one global south nation to another as we find the population increasing in the global south. We already have great examples of this in the fair trade movement. But importantly, it will be putting people and nature central to how we create and look after soils as a carbon sink and how we produce clothing that truly respects people and planet.
So to summarize, Safia is sharing that the global south will certainly be a supplier, including to other nations in the global south, but putting nature and people first.
Systems change is only possible if business, governance, the media and citizens all do their bit and work together. We now turn to critic and journalist Daniel Penny to think with us on the role of the media and consumers. Daniel, welcome. Can I ask you first how citizens, consumers that is, can accept lifestyles of less?
Sure, thanks Kate. I would say consumer habits are deeply ingrained and we're not suddenly all going to decide one day to stop buying things. In the era of zombie capitalism, most people relate to fashion exclusively through consumption, which is a fairly recent phenomenon historically. Cheap clothes, I think, better than almost any category of things you can buy, scratch the psychological itch for something new and the social desire to be seen wearing it at, as we know, grave environmental cost. So I think the way to start to live with less, to use your phrase, is more of a paradigm shift. It's no longer thinking of ourselves as consumers, so rejecting that as the label for how we relate to fashion. I think we need to identify as makers, as curators, and as, I mean, this might be a little precious, but like guardians of resources. And I would say it's the job of the media to start pushing that agenda.
And one of the recurrent critiques of environmentally conscious initiatives is that they're only available for a wealthy middle class. How can making the sorts of shift that we need avoid increasing social injustice?
From the buyer's point of view, if we're talking about environmental clothing or green clothing only being, a certain luxury price, I think the most obvious is secondhand. Secondhand is so much cheaper than buying new in many cases. It's better. And I think, I'm noticing this among younger millennials and Generation Z, there's a real shift towards an interest in vintage and secondhand, and an acknowledgement that those clothes might actually be cooler. That's what I'm trying to convince people of, because there's just so much surplus. So, the idea that you have to buy a $200, I don't know, like organic cotton pair of jeans, like that doesn't really make sense to me. If you're someone who doesn't have a lot of money, you can buy a vintage pair of Wranglers on eBay for $15 and they'll look better and they'll be just as well made.
And finally, can I just ask you, well, we all know, don't we, that the fashion media is really influenced by and linked to advertising revenues, but is there any way that you can imagine that the role of fashion and lifestyle media can really support us in a transition to less?
Well, I would say yes, but there are some caveats. I think the first thing is we can't keep covering fashion as if it were consumer reporting, where we're educating readers about what to purchase next. And that really just becomes a drumbeat of buy, buy, buy. I think our role is to ask readers to be more imaginative in how they relate to their clothes, how to remix them, repair them, or upcycle them. And I don't want the fashion media to become a champion of a kind of faux minimalism, which itself becomes a trend, like the KonMari method or the closet edit, where people fanatically clear out their wardrobe just to refill it in a year or two. We can't have a sustainability issue of a magazine and then go back to business as usual. And I can even give you an example. I was browsing, I won't say which, but a well-known men's fashion site this morning. And I found an article entitled 27 Early Prime Day Style Steals to Get You a Hem Primed for Amazon's Big Sale. So if major media outlets are publishing stories like this one about a company whose employees suffer injuries at nearly twice the industry average to meet inhuman workloads, all to deliver us cool stuff we don't need, then I don't think we're really doing our job as fashion writers. I think we can't become reliant on fashion companies for advertising, which is something that fashion media has always been over-reliant on. We need to be delivering investigative reporting, and it needs to be something that serves our readers. And in that way, to have subscribers. The publications that are doing best at Condé Nast, I think, are the New Yorker, right? Which has, not everyone can be the New Yorker, but it's something where people pay for the journalism because it's really the best, and they don't rely on advertising. And I think more other publications need to start thinking about or switching to a nonprofit model and relying on grants and collaborations with the universities or whatever to fund real reporting instead of just basically doing press releases.
Thanks, Daniel.
We've had many questions coming into us, and we will try to deal with them in different ways, maybe through social media. We want to encourage all of you to think about what you need to pack for an EarthLogic journey. We know you want to take some things, courage, resilience, and leave some things behind, like the idea that technology will fix it. We are so grateful for all of you joining us today. Thank you for spending time with us in EarthLogic. Remember, less is the biggest provocation. It's not easy, but it has to be done, and only we can do it together. We would really like to keep the conversation going with you and hear how you work with less and EarthLogic. And maybe you start by sharing exactly what you pack. So thank you again, and take care, everybody.
Good morning. My name is Jason Kibbe, and I am the CEO of HIGCO. We are the technology company that supports the Higg Index. I am so excited to be here with all of you at the Copenhagen Fashion Summit. And during today's presentation, I'm going to discuss the future of consumer-facing transparency, how companies are starting to communicate social and environmental sustainability information about the products they make and their global value chains. We're going to hear about the importance of transparency overall. We're going to hear about a test that the Sustainable Apparel Coalition did this summer with many of its members, and we're going to hear from some of my colleagues, Pascal Brunn from H&M and Samantha Sims from PVH, about what they learned during this test. And then I'm going to preview with you some of the work that we're doing right now to launch Higg transparency publicly and what it looks like. Now, while we won't have time for questions and answers during this session, we are capturing questions and we will be happy to post them and share them after the event. Excuse me, I see that you see my notes, so how about now? Does that look good? Great, okay. So my apologies for that. Here's the better view. So why is transparency important? Fashion is the world's, excuse my camera change here. Fashion is the world's most distributed, opaque, and difficult to understand industrial system in the world. Fashion revolution gave us an incredibly important question: who made my clothes? This really has guided a lot of what we've looked at over the last few years. Transparency, traceability, and assessments are starting to answer that question. But we not only have to answer the question of who made my clothes, but we have to answer how they were made. Let's be real, transparency is still imperfect. We're a long, long way from where we are today, where we need to be today. And transparency has to start with the best available data. It won't be perfect, but we have to start. We have to put it out there. We have to let the debate continue. And transparency is so critical for the different stakeholders in this ecosystem. For NGOs and other external stakeholders that are in civil society, they want to see transparency so that they can confirm and trust what the brands say and what they're actually doing. The media right now has a terrible challenge with massive misinformation, and we need real data and real comparability so that journalists can understand and validate the claims that brands and retailers make. Governments need real data to understand the impacts of the industry so that they can address the concerns of citizens and stakeholders in civil society that address these negative externalities. We need transparency to do this. And finally, consumers. Consumers more and more report that they want to know how their clothes are made, how their shoes are made. They want to buy and wear things that they can trust and that didn't harm the environment. They want to know that it's helping workers and not hurting them. I think we all have to remember, and when I look back at why I got into fashion sustainability, it is because fashion is a physical and visual expression of who we are and who we want to be. We need transparency so that consumers can know that the garments that they buy align with their values. So transparency is so critical to this industry, but we're so far away from it. And real transparency at scale, the kind that would actually change the system, has been incredibly elusive. You've probably heard about transparency and circularity. These are critical concepts, and they're critical to achieving systemic change in this industry, but we're still a long way away from it. And one of the biggest problems with this is that the current state of transparency is that we're awash in these vague product claims. Many of these claims are made with no way to verify them. There isn't a way to compare the claims. There isn't a way to really understand and explore their validity. This is what we want to solve with Higg data. So from the start, when the Sustainable Apparel Coalition began developing tools for developing its Higg tools, they were designed to enable transparency. And though many would like one perfect rating that works for all consumers, that works in all markets, that works for all brands, that works for all companies, that works for all products, this has been elusive. And this has been the path that the SAC and HIGCO and industry partners have all been together, working together on. But actually creating that perfect rating has been a real challenge. And so this year, in partnership with the SAC, we proposed a different direction, creating ways for companies to enable transparency in their own voice while maintaining comparability and deeper data. We see this as the critical unlock. Allow brands to have their voice, speak differently to different consumers in different markets, but keep that comparable. And the way to do this is really to embrace transparency digitally. And so over the last few months, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition has been testing with its members direct on product transparency. And so these are examples of things that were actually live. These were tests that H&M, Zalando, PVH did together to actually see what is the reaction of consumers? How does this work? What do they respond to? Does it change the way that the consumers trust the garments or not trust the garments? And so these three leading brands and retailers tested this directly. And what I am so impressed with is that more than 7 million global customers actually participating in this testing. We believe that this is the largest A/B test experiment ever for consumer-facing transparency or sustainability information. We tested the concepts here, like you see, various ratings, various scales, just badges. And we're going to hear about more from my colleagues as to what they learned. So now you're going to hear from Pascal Brunn, who is the head of sustainability at H&M, and Samantha Sims, who's the VP of Environmental Sustainability and Product Stewardship at PVH Corp. We'll hear from them now.
Well, first of all, I believe that transparency is a huge tool to drive impact at scale. Basically, it empowers our customers to take conscious decisions, and it helps our customers to drive change, to understand as well where they can impact themselves and what impact do they have also.
Getting to the place where consumers can have consistent, credible, and clear or really simple information on the sustainable attributes and eventually social attributes of their products really requires industry collaboration across the board. So this year we were really fortunate, as I mentioned, to work with a number of partners, but we got to work very directly with our partners at Zalando to test out specifically how the SAC's Material Sustainability Index information could be translated into a consumer-facing communication. So we worked really closely with the team to take information, connect that at a product level and present that at a product level, and then test that out with many, many consumers. And what was really interesting about the study was first that we found that the number of consumers surveyed the response rate of our surveys far exceeded our expectations. So that alone reflected a desire for consumers to want to understand more and learn more and just to simply have access to sustainable products.
And what we have performed here, we have performed different tests. We have performed a qualitative test and a quantitative test. The qualitative test was more, the customers were more aware of what they were going into, where in the quantitative, it was an A/B testing platform, so to say. So what we have learned from those two? Basically, we have learned that HIG transparency helped to create awareness, perception, and create trust through our products. However, we have seen that at this stage, it doesn't create selling, it doesn't impact selling, neither a customer preference. However, I strongly believe that by increasing customer awareness, creating trust, it will drive positive impact across the industry.
We also found that the survey and the work we did to collect consumer insights validated it is critical that the information is super simple. You have to share it with consumers in a simple, clear way. It also underscored some of what we were seeing, and especially what we were seeing in Europe, but we've started to see gradually more over the globe, that consumers are really interested in purchasing sustainable products. We've seen this through the global pandemic, the COVID pandemic. Despite it being a challenging time for the industry and for consumers in a variety of ways, the increase in interest in sustainable products has really been present. And then we've also seen that echoed through studies and research that groups such as McKinsey have done.
An important part as well that we should not forget is our internal colleagues. Transparency and HIG data will empower our colleagues to take informed decisions. It will help our colleagues to drive impact when they have a decision to make when it comes to a product or a supplier to place their orders. By having comparability within the different products, within the different brands, this is how we're going to create change. HIG has a unique position today to deliver and to offer that opportunity for our customers to make informed decisions.
We know that we want data out there that's credible, that's clear and simple for consumers, but it has to be consistently presented. And unless we have more brands and wholesalers and e-tailers partnering to test out what works for their different consumer bases and the way to present the insights from these HIG tools, we're not going to get there in a scalable and a quick enough way.
But I'm very proud to inform you today that we will and we have the ambition to start to go live with our HIG index on our product by first half 2021. So overall, HIG and the HIG suite of tools, HIG FEM, HIG FSLM, HIG product, MSI, HIG BRM, basically are the core of our transparency work. It's even at the core of what we call the theory of change, where transparency creates an engagement and an empowerment for both brands, customers, stakeholders, manufacturers, all together to drive change.
Okay, confirming that I have the correct view open from my colleagues. Okay, great. So today, and first I want to stop and thank Pascal Brun and Samantha Sims for sharing their views with us. We really appreciate not only participating in this session today, but also sharing the very active engagement on testing HIG consumer transparency. I also really want to thank our colleagues at Zalando, who were in another session, but really also did heavy testing in this, and it's really, really critical and important to this work. So today, for the first time, I want to introduce the HIG Open Data Portal. The HIG Open Data Portal gives product, material, supply chain, and brand sustainability data in context for anyone to understand, validate, and start to trust sustainability claims. So to bring transparency to life at this global scale, we're employing this method to actually support all of the information that we've been collecting over the years. This will put public sustainability data claims in a digital format at an unprecedented scale. And it solves the challenge of making product claims to ensure that they're credible, backed by data, comparable, contextualized, and in line with the SAC and the industry's guidelines on performance communication. This portal will be able to host hundreds of thousands of automated sustainability performance claims and make them accessible to consumers and all stakeholders. Anyone can access this data portal. For brands, retailers, and manufacturers, this gives you a way to back up claims and use data to inform corporate sustainability strategies. For consumers, it will give them actually the data behind these claims in the first way so that they can understand and dig deeper in what it means to make a sustainable product. And for NGOs, regulators, governments, this gives a way to actually compare and validate claims by the apparel industry, track progress, and make it accountable. We are trying to provide data that backs up the claims, helps build trust when consumers don't trust claims right now. So let's take a deeper dive into what this will offer, and I'll show you some of our concepts. So right here, this is a traditional product page. This is what you would see on any kind of e-commerce platform when you're buying something online. If there's data behind this product, you will see a HIG logo, signposting that there's sustainability information and maybe a sustainability claim. This will be a visual indicator to consumers that you can trust that the company is using good data to assess its products, that it realizes its obligations not to just cherry pick claims about what it's doing, and that it's very serious about its sustainability impact. And we know for many consumers, this high-level indicator is all they may want to see. This is the indication that there is data behind it, but they also want to know that other stakeholders in society, other stakeholders that are engaging on fashion issues, that they can explore this. They can actually call it a product that has an impact that's unacceptable. So we built this, and we are building the data behind this using the best available data. As often as possible, we have completely public data sets and we share them openly. But in some cases, there's data that exists from a private source, which the Sustainable Apparel Coalition or HIGCO doesn't control. But without this, we can't create comparability. Over time, we hope that there are more and more public data sets available that are completely open, so that data, including life cycle data, can be available to all and acted upon. So let's take a deeper look to see what happens when you go into the open data portal. So this first step is when you actually go in and want to look at the overall footprint of a product. So here, you'll actually be able to see how this product compares to others and what the data behind that product looks like. This is taking data from the HIG product module, and it looks at everything from the materials to the processes in the finished goods manufacturing, to packaging, logistics, the actual impact of selling the garment. Sometimes that can be very impactful, oftentimes it is not. And then it also goes even further and goes into the product care and use phase to try to understand what is the impact of that product during that product's useful life. And then when the product reaches the end of its useful life, what is the impact of disposing of it? This gives the comprehensive view of a product impact through its whole life cycle and provides real information on its product footprint. So now let's go further and explore what we can do for the brand and retail module. Here, and how you can actually understand the impacts of the brand on the product itself. Here we're using overview data from the HIG brand and retail module. And this tool is essentially a tool for social and environmental due diligence. And it shows the sustainability of the brand who made the product. The SAC worked very closely with the OECD on aligning the brand and retail module against the OECD's guidelines for due diligence. Helps you learn much more about the risks and the performance of a brand. It looks at everything from the environmental performance, also to really critical practices, issues such as purchasing practices or supply chain management. And as we know, purchasing practices can have just a disproportionate and massive impact on the lives and livelihood of workers. It also looks even beyond what's typically done and looks at logistics. How does this product move throughout the world? How is it sold? That can have a significant impact. So overall, we're looking at all of the areas that a brand or a retailer has that impacts the sustainability of this product from the time that they purchase it and design it to the time they sold it and ship it to the customers. So what we're also really excited about in this open data portal is that you can go directly into the supply chain impacts of the facilities that make the garments. Right now, we are using the HIG facilities environmental module. We've worked with over 15,000 facilities to track everything from carbon emissions to chemistry management to the overall environmental management of a product. You can actually see the performance of the factories that made the garment. Are they a leader or are they a laggard? All of this information is available and contextualized. The SAC is now working with HIGCO on launching a social score today, and we hope to have a social solution in place by the time we open and release the open data platform. So using the open data portal, we want to share information on the most critical issues to society right now. One that we are double clicking in and trying to get more and more information out about is carbon emissions. And we're really glad that the HIG tool set can actually share product carbon emissions, factory carbon emissions, and even brand and retailer carbon emissions. And all of this information can be shared on the open data portal. Now, we know that as the world evolves and as new problems emerge or as old problems get worse, that we're going to have to change the type of data that we collect and the type of data that we share on this portal. Today, we can do a lot on carbon, and this is a critically important issue. But in the future, as new measuring methodologies emerge and new data sources become available on new issues that are critical, such as microfibers pollution, we want to add those data sources and those ratings as well. So why we called this the open data portal is that we want all of the information that we're putting up to actually be supported with real open data that the users can actually download. Not just claims or snippets of information or simple rankings, but actual data. And this is an example of the kind of thing that would emerge on one of our pages, that you as a user could actually filter and download a CSV file for offline analysis. And so this means for the first time, a third party can actually externally validate the claims and make sure that it's real, make sure that it seems legitimate. And we think that this is really the foundation to creating a high integrity transparency program that can scale up not only across the fashion industry, but across other industries as well. And we think this is kind of the new standard of what should be used for transparency for consumer products. We think that this is going to be used mostly by NGOs, by academics, by governments, by journalists, and maybe occasionally even the really enthusiastic, sustainable fashion consumer. But all of them will be able to download real data and actually understand where the claims came from. So the way that you see this is all coming together to actually create digital transparency for the fashion industry at a new global scale. This digital experience will make critical sustainability information accessible, comparable, and contextualized. And you can see specific social and environmental performance. So we can embed the claims directly on a product page or the signpost directly on a product page, and then go deeper into these overview pages where you can learn about the impacts of the product. And then you can actually double click and get the data itself that goes behind those sustainability impacts. But I want to be really clear. This is just the start. We have a lot to learn. We will be filling in data sets and we will not have complete data for all products, but we have to get started. We don't expect to get it right immediately. We expect the portal to evolve and improve over time. And thanks to digitization, we can do this really quickly. We can learn, evolve, modify. And this is why as we learn and change information, it can scale through the entire ecosystem and repower those new data sets and new product informations. We would like the marker on the product page to be a marker of the commitment to transparency. When you see Higg transparency on a product page, you know that there's this deep information behind it. And our goal is to provide inclusive tools that anyone can engage with transparency so that transparency can scale up regardless of a company's budgets or resources. If you're a small organization with no IT budget, or if you're, we can give you a widget that you can drop into your web page and automatically display this information on a product page. If you're a large organization, you can use our APIs to pull the data in real time and run your own visualizations. And if you're a massive, massive organization, like some of them that you've been hearing from over the last couple of days, you may just need to configure the claims using the data that we provide and manage your own visualizations and manage your own data. We want this solution to work for everyone. So this is building on some efforts that we recently launched a few weeks ago, where factories can share their factory outputs from the Higg Facilities Environmental Module. This was just launched, and so we're just getting started on this, but this allows Higg data to be open and available publicly for the first time, and this is available now. The Higg Facility Performance Toolkit, which was created with many stakeholders in the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, manufacturers, brands, NGOs, all working together to clarify what kind of information should be shared. It has graphics and various ways that facilities can actually share with their value chain partners and publicly show their sustainability commitments, performance, and progress. Now, it's important to note, in this world of GDPR, those who create data, in this case, the factories, they own their data and they decide if they're going to share it and make it open. But we believe this is the first step in matching the incentives and rewards between buyers and manufacturers, where the best performing facilities can be rewarded by purchasing commitments from brands who are committed to sustainability. So let's step back and look at what this means. This is a global industry effort at scale. And we're really excited to share what this means for the industry overall. We're starting to see some really big steps towards becoming more transparent. We know it has taken far longer than any of us would have liked, but I am so excited to see where we are getting to. We are working very closely with the Sustainable Apparel Coalition on this. They devise many of the guidelines for what legitimate transparency looks like. But what's also really important is that the Sustainable Apparel Coalition has included membership requirements that require companies scale transparency using the Open Data Portal. And by 2025, SAC member brands will be required to publicly disclose all their sustainability data using the Open Data Portal. Some of the brands that you've heard from today are leading the way on this consumer-facing transparency, and they've got fast timelines to start sharing some of this information. And the SAC is leading its membership engagement to understand how we can go further to share this information broadly as an industry. Now, again, we have to remember that digital transparency has incredible promise, but it's going to evolve, and we still have a lot to learn. We've built this transparency platform on the Higg Index tools and know that they're going to change. And in many ways, we know that we're just at the beginning of what transparency will look like. But digitization enables HIGCO to see how people interact with that data so that we can evolve the platform in real time. Data like this has never been available at this scale, and the possibilities of what it can bring for this industry and change are really massive. But again, we know we're not going to get this right away, and we are going to have to keep evolving this. We think that everyone has a critical role to play in supporting, expanding, and dramatically scaling transparency. Consumers should start to use this data and ask for it. Make sure that the brands that they care about are actually sharing data so that they know that the products they buy align with the values that they hold dearly. And we, as consumers, we're really excited to work with you on this. I couldn't be more excited to see where this is going to go. For brands and retailers, this is about sharing your data publicly and with all stakeholders so that you can innovate and so that everyone knows where you stand. For NGOs, for the press, for civil society, for governments, we see your role as really important to creating accountability throughout this industry, openly and transparently. We look forward to sharing more with you as we continue to build transparency and are thrilled that you're taking this journey with us. We are looking to launch this in the first half of 2020, and we are so excited to work with leaders who are willing to take that first step. Again, I want to remind you that we don't have time for questions today. We will collect the questions and share them later. So if there are any questions in the box, please do put them in there and we will get to them afterwards. I just want to thank you, thank the Copenhagen Fashion Summit, thank PVH, H&M for their participation, thank the SAC for its leadership on driving the sustainability transparency pilots and for shaping what this looks like. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.